but a single glance was all that the king was allowed to have, for the former operator waved his dusky palm across his vision, and once more the king saw only the fire-lighted walls and dark shapes flickering about upon them. The two who had spoken for the rest seemed likewise to have vanished. But at last the king discovered them, standing one on each side of the fireplace. They kept close to the chimney-wall, and talked to each other across the length of the chimney-piece, thus avoiding the direct rays of the fire, which, though light is necessary to their appearing to human eyes, do not agree with them at all, much less give birth to them, as the king was soon to learn. After a few minutes they again approached the bed, and spoke thus:
"It is now getting dark, please your majesty. We mean out of doors in the snow. Your majesty may see from where he is lying the cold light of its great winding sheet, a famous carpet for the shadows to dance upon, your majesty. All our brothers and sisters will be at church now, before going to their night's work."
"Do they always go to church before they go to work?"
"They always go to church first."
"Where is the church?"
"In Iceland. Would your majesty like to see it?"
"How can I go and see it, when, as you know very well, I am ill in bed? Besides, I should be sure to take cold in a frosty night like this, even if I put on the blankets and took the feather bed for a muff." A sort of quivering passed over their faces, which seemed to be their mode of laughing. The whole shape of the face shook and fluctuated as if it had been some dark fluid, till by slow degrees of gathering calm it settled into its former rest. Then one of them drew aside the curtains of the bed, and the window-curtains not having yet been drawn, the king beheld the white glimmering night outside, struggling with the heaps of darkness that tried to quench it, and the heavens full of stars, flashing and sparkling like live jewels. The other shadow went towards the fire and vanished in it. Scores of shadows immediately began an insane dance all about the room, disappearing one after the other through the uncovered window, and gliding darkly away over the face of the white snow; for the window looked at once on a field of snow. In a few moments the room was quite cleared of them, but instead of being relieved by their absence, the king felt immediately as if he were in a dead house, and could hardly breathe for the sense of emptiness and desolation that fell upon him. But as he lay looking out on the snow, which stretched blank and wide before him, he spied in the distance a long dark line, which drew nearer and nearer, and showed itself at last to be all the Shadows, walking in a double row, and carrying in the midst of them something like a bier. They vanished under the window, but soon reappeared, having somehow climbed up the wall of the house, for they entered in perfect order by the window, as if melting through the transparency of the glass. They still carried the bier or litter. It was covered with richest furs, and skins of gorgeous wild beasts, whose eyes were replaced by sapphires and emeralds, that glittered and gleamed in the fire and snowlight. The outermost skins sparkled with frost, but the inside ones were soft and warm and dry as the down under a swan's wing. The Shadows approached the bed, and set the litter upon it. Then a number of them brought a huge fur robe, and, wrapping it round the king, laid him on the litter in the midst of the furs. Nothing could be more gentle and respectful than the way in which they moved him, and he never thought of refusing to go. Then they put something on his head, and, lifting the litter, carried him once round the room to fall into order. As he passed the mirror he saw that he was covered with royal ermine, and that his head wore a wonderful crown of gold, set with none but red stones, rubies, and carbuncles, and garnets, and others whose names he could not tell, glowed gloriously around his head, like the salamandrine essence of all the Christmas fires over the world. A sceptre lay beside him, a rod of ebony surmounted by a cone-shaped diamond, which, cut in 100 facets, flashed all the hues of the rainbow, and threw coloured gleams on every side, that looked like shadows too, but more ethereal than those that bore him. Then the shadows rose gently to the window, passed through it, and, sinking slowly upon the field of outstretched snow, commenced an orderly gliding rather than march along the frozen surface. They took it by turns to bear the king, as they sped with the swiftness of thought in a straight line towards the north. The pole star rose above their heads with visible rapidity, for indeed they moved quite as fast as sad thoughts, though not with all the speed of happy desires. England and Scotland slid past the litter of the King of the Shadows. Over rivers and lakes they skimmed and glided. They climbed the high mountains and crossed the valleys with a fearless bound, till they came to John o' Groat's house and the northern sea. The sea was not frozen, for all the stars shone as clear out of the deeps below as they shone out of the deeps above; and as the bearers slid along the blue-grey surface, with never a furrow in their track, so pure was the water beneath, that the king saw neither surface, bottom, nor substance to it, and seemed to be gliding only through the blue sphere of heaven, with the stars above him and the stars below him, and between the stars and him nothing but an emptiness, where, for the first time in his life, his soul felt that it had room enough. At length they reached the rocky shores of Iceland. There they landed, still pursuing their journey. All this time the king felt no cold, for the red stones in his crown kept him warm, and the emerald and sapphire eyes of the wild beasts kept the frosts from settling upon his litter. Oftentimes upon their way they had to pass through forests, caverns, and rock-shadowed paths, where it was so dark that at first the king feared he should lose his shadows altogether. But as soon as they entered such places, the diamond in his sceptre began to shine and glow and flash, sending out streams of light of all the colours that the painter's soul could dream of; in which light the shadows grew livelier and stronger than ever, speeding through the dark ways with an all but blinding swiftness. In the light of the diamond, too, some of their forms became more simple and human, while others seemed only to break out into a yet more untamable absurdity. Once, as they passed through a cave, the king actually saw some of their eyes. Strange shadow eyes! He had never seen any of their eyes before. But at the same moment, when he saw their eyes, he knew their faces too, for they turned them full upon him for an instant; and the other shadows, catching sight of these, shrank and shivered and nearly vanished. Lovely faces they were, but the king was very thoughtful after he saw them, and continued rather troubled all the rest of the journey. He could not account for those faces being there, and the faces of shadows too, with living eyes. But he soon found that amongst the shadows a man must learn never to be surprised at anything, for if he does not he will soon grow quite stupid in consequence of the endless recurrence of surprises. At last they climbed up the bed of a little stream, and then, passing through a narrow rocky defile, came out suddenly upon the side of a mountain overlooking a blue frozen lake in the very heart of mighty hills. Overhead the aurora borealis was shivering and flashing like a battle of 10,000 spears. Underneath, its beams passed faintly over the blue ice and the sides of the snow-clad mountains, whose tops shot up like huge icicles all about, with here